there is an interest in the methane and or carbon intensity of the product that we produce. And that's for both utility customers that are using our product to distribute to their customers, using it to produce power, or a company that is, bringing natural gas into their system, and they're looking at an overall net zero goal.
Fixing methane leaks also helps producers like Jonah Energy meet the needs of investors and insurers.
A lot of insurers, a lot of investors today, our management team, they also look at risk and not having the ability to operate, the social license to operate, as people like to say, I think is an intangible value. It's hard to put a dollar value on that. But when we are able to say, look, we know what our emissions are, it gives our investors, it gives our insurers confidence in the work that we do.
Well, it's interesting. Do investors really ask questions about methane emissions when they decide whether to put capital into your company?
They do. There's typically a series of questions, and it isn't just emissions. It has to do with all of the things that we do environmentally on an operations basis.
Why are insurers concerned about methane emissions?
From the questions that they ask, the things they're interested in are long-term environmental issues, such as a large spill of fluid, a major release of natural gas. So understanding that we have the best practices and the best tools and technologies available to us to minimize those things, I think is very important to an insurer.
Beyond the needs of investors and insurers, U.S. natural gas producers also have to take into account regulation from abroad. Places like Europe and Japan are imposing emissions requirements on the producers they import from.
Internationally, what's really interesting is the countries that are starting to look at importing LNG are also looking at standards for that LNG. How is that gas produced? How is it liquefied? How is it shipped? Japan and JOGMEC, the Organization of Metals and Energy Security, the European Union just established methane rules and looking at implementing how those methane rules apply to gas imports coming into Europe.
Jutta, Paulus, a German member of the European Parliament, spearheaded the EU's methane regulations, which will ultimately apply to the gas they import from the United States.
It's not a ban of importing that gas, but it will just become more expensive importing dirty gas instead of importing gas where emissions are mitigated.
From the more sophisticated means of monitoring methane emissions, do you have a sense of where the worst problems are?
When we are looking to the US, it really depends on whom you're looking at. There are companies that work quite well on mitigating their emissions. There are companies that work not so well. So the Permian Basin is, let's say, on the not so well side, whereas in Texas, there are some companies that are taking action already. So it's really a mixed picture.
We do have a new administration coming to the United States, and the incoming president, Donald Trump, has not always been warm-hearted towards some of the climate initiatives. Do you anticipate this may become part of the trade negotiations going forward as we talk about tariffs increasingly here?
When we look at the gas market worldwide, there will be quite a bit of LNG capacity coming online within this decade. In order to, let's say, still get a good price for US LNG, which of course will be further exported to around the globe, it would be rather a smart move to work on mitigating methane emissions, because Europe is simply the market where you can get the best price for your gas. We pay more than, let's say, Sri Lanka or India or even China. So knowing that the incoming president is always in favor of a good deal, it would be a very good deal to invest little money to get a lot more profit for your product.
As countries look to set standards and impose regulations on their imported gas, certifying emissions will be key, something Jonah's Howard Dieter says they are working on.
As you look forward to complying with whether it's Japan, whether it's Europe, how are you going to certify that, in fact, it complies with the regulations?
I think a lot of those discussions are in their early stages, but we're working with a team that has the ability to actually show what we do here in Jonah Field from an emission standpoint to track that across the value chain and deliver a methane molecule to a liquefaction facility on the Gulf Coast with an exact methane intensity and an exact carbon intensity.
Are we looking toward a day when the price of natural gas may be affected by whether you can certify that or not? That is to say, you'll have more of a market, more buyers for some natural gas than for others.
Certainly, being able to demonstrate that you can meet or exceed a standard that a customer sets, I think is very important for not just Jonah, but for our industry.
Monitoring methane leaks is critical for current producers, but what about orphaned or abandoned wells? Many still emit methane, yet no one knows exactly how many there are. Talal Debs spent 15 years at JP Morgan, where he helped finance oil companies and also set up the first carbon credit trading desk. Now he runs Zafiro Methane, a company that cleans up these wells and finds new ways to pay for it.
So what's involved in cleaning up an oil field or a gas field?
It really is a crew of 3 to 5 people with a workover rig, it's called, sort of a basic repair rig. You have to get over the well. And then what we do is we go downhole, we do a number of tests, and then we establish 2 different impermeable seals. One that's sort of very deep near the producing zone where the oil and gas was coming from. The other one closer to the surface. If that isn't in place, you're going to get methane leaks, and sometimes very often you would get leaks of liquid hydrocarbon into the water table as well.
Debs describes a systemic problem. For decades, oil and gas companies unloaded aging wells to smaller, underfunded operators who extracted what they could, but then went bankrupt, often because of a drop in energy prices, leaving wells unplugged and leaking methane.
They can't find anyone who's financially responsible to clean them up.
No one owns a lot of these wells.
The reason they're called orphan wells is that no one owns them. Literally not owned by any solvent person, natural person or corporate person.
Estimates of orphan wells with no responsible operator range from 310,000 to 740,000. EPA estimates 3.5 million unplugged wells are abandoned or no longer in use. At $100,000 each to fix them, who is going to pay?
The federal government, through its bipartisan infrastructure bill, had set aside $4.7 billion to the states for this problem. And those monies represent somewhere between sort of 1% and 3% of the overall need. We only plug several hundred wells a year now, which makes us the largest single plugger in North America, which is frightening to think. But we want to be doing several thousand a year in a short period of time. Given
the size of the problem and the expense in really addressing the problem, this sounds like it's really only the government, whether it's state or federal, that are going to be in a position to come in and actually make a difference.
I think the far better solution would be a market solution. And the reason I say that is, look, let's face it, there's no one to pay for it now. We can bring to bear technology to get the least cost execution, and we're building a business to attack the problem.
You mentioned a market solution. You know markets. You worked at JP Morgan. They have something to do with markets. Explain to me the market solution. I think I understand the cost side. Where does the revenue or the investment come from?
Sure. This is a little bit of, build it and they will come, right? Yet we're on track. We're sort of between $40 and $50 million revenue business today. And so, there is definitely some revenue. But when we clean up a well, what we're doing is we're delivering actually something of economic good. It's not just a service. We're taking a contaminated site that couldn't be used for anything else and was causing problems for nearby communities, and we've turned it into a valuable piece of property again. And so who pays for it now? Oil companies will pay for it. We often are the service provider of choice. In addition to corporate clients who pay for our services, the carbon markets pay for our services. There's numerous companies out there that, for one reason or another, their stakeholders want them to be investing in environmental cleanup, especially emissions reduction. And that is intermediated largely by what are called environmental markets or carbon credit markets. We're actually engaging with landowners right now who have some of these wells on their property. They just inherited this liability, and there's no way to really pay for it. And the basis of our proposal is, look, we will clean up the oil wells on your property, and we will be responsible for monetizing that. We'll pay for it ourselves because we think we can get enough carbon credits on the back end to more than pay for it.
A lot of people had net zero commitments. Are they going to back away from them?
Well, some of them are already, but I think what the markets are also telling us is certain investor bases, especially in the world of tech and data, simply do require that there is a serious focus on the environmental impact of the energy that's consumed by these data centers for AI, for instance. When our energy companies and our large tech companies that are big power consumers now, energy consumers now, really start to see the industrial logic that we should be funding this ourselves through the markets, I wouldn't be surprised if what is now probably a 100-year backlog of wells that need to be cleaned up gets cleaned up in our lifetime.
Have the markets discovered, or are they in the process of discovering, that contingent liability that's sitting out there?
I don't think they have fully discovered it in oil and gas, but I'll tell you, there's a really important evolution that's happened. Those companies have gone from being mostly interested in showing their investors the new oil and gas discoveries that they've had, to living responsibly within their cash flow. And that mantra, which has been the dominating mantra, eventually will beg the question of the cash flows associated with this cleanup.
When you go in to meet with a CEO of a big energy company, what's the response?
The response has really intrigued me. When I meet with a CEO, I explain to them, hey, look, if we did this differently and you accelerated rather than delaying your backlog of retirement obligations, we could do it in such a way that you would be able to borrow more money more cheaply for new drilling, which gives you a return. And your investors, your equity investors, would love the fact that you were, as they say, as they were kitchen sinking all these liabilities, just getting right in front of it. And one of my favorite responses was, he said, look, I get it, you're 100% right, but don't forget, I can keep dancing for a very long time. I think it will be potentially a while before the rank and file of investors can understand this is good. But I'm encouraged that the CEOs, they do get it. And we're going to find someone soon, I hope, who's bold enough to be the first one to take the plunge.